Today we're talking about the My Little Pony movie from 2017, and more than any other film on the animated 100 list so far, I think people are going to have very strong opinions about this one.
What you talking about?
They're either going to want me to dunk on this film because it's a My Little Pony movie, or they're going to want me to completely praise it because they're fans of My Little Pony.
Big mistake. Big.
Huge!
Ultimately, I think I'm going to end up disappointing both sides. If you're new here, my name's Josh Taylor. Welcome to the Animated 100 list, where every other week we sit down like a movie club and talk about a different animated film theatrically released from all around the world from the beginning of animation up until today. The way that we go about each of these films is discussing 5 different categories. They are animation, story, characters, sound and music, and the historical and cultural impact. And then we end up rating each category, eventually giving it a final score to put it on the list to hopefully find the 100 greatest animated films of all time.
We got your back.
My Little Pony the movie was a comment-suggested film. It's from 2017. It's an hour and 39 minutes long. I'm very aware, because people have made me aware, that there are several My Little Pony movies, but this one was a theatrically released film. That's why we're doing it. We're only doing theatrically released films. Also, I understand that there is a My Little Pony the movie from the 1980s. Maybe we'll get to that one someday, but for now we're talking about the 2017 film, which kind of goes along with the Friendship is Magic series that came out. Very long-running series, the longest of all the My Little Pony series. It's the 4th iteration of My Little Pony. I did some research. Before this, I'd never watched any My Little Pony shows at all. I'd never owned My Little Ponies. I know vaguely about the fandom and the bronies, but really that's it. So I'm approaching this with fresh eyes. I'm approaching this film with the idea that we're just talking about this film. We're not necessarily talking about the TV show. We're not talking about previous generations of My Little Pony or future generations of My Little Pony. We're simply just talking about this film. So let's talk about the animation of this movie. Right up front, I think that the animation for the Friendship is Magic version of My Little Pony and for this film is fantastic. I love the thick outlines, not in black, but usually in a darker or lighter shade of the color that it's outlining. It feels really unique to these characters and to this film in particular. Also, the shadow work or the camera work, the 3D imaging, everything feels really smooth. Everything feels very computer-based, very like tablet drawing-based, if you get what I'm saying. Like, it's not hand-drawn. Everything feels very computerized, but it still feels stylized to My Little Pony. And I kind of like this look. I love how smooth and welcoming this is. It's just nice to look at. The colors are very fun. I also really love that when they leave Equestria and they go into these other areas on this kind of Odyssey adventure, that the color palettes change and that these characters look out of their element. I feel like the color palette, more than anything, feels like a character within this film. I feel like the color palette explains very much who these characters are and the worlds that they're entering. Also, I'll say that there are times when different images come up. There's like this sequence that feels very Microsoft Paint-esque. There are 3D objects in a 2D world that don't feel out of place. The thing I want to praise about this film is the animation itself. I really enjoy the way this film looks, the way it moves, the intentional types of camera work and editing, and the animation drawings themselves. I want to give this a 8 out of 10. Very fun. Moving on to the story here, I think this is where the movie lacks a bit. The Friendship is Magic series lasted for years. It's very much a series based on characters and seeing these characters and being able to identify with these characters. So it feels like a very character-based film that is less plot heavy and more, hey, let's meet this character, or hey, why don't we meet this character over here? What do they have to say? What do they want? What do they need? And even though it's an Odyssey-like adventure where all of these main six, the Twilight Sparkle, Applejack, etc., all go out and end up meeting different characters to try and find their way back to Equestria, I don't necessarily feel like the journey was difficult. I don't feel like there was a moment where these characters were truly in trouble. I felt like because this movie depends on its characters, and especially depends on the comedy of these characters, that the drama of this story was completely lost.
I know we have to go, but you guys saw how disappointed Princess Skystar was. Couldn't we stay for just a little longer?
Defeating the Storm King and Tempest Shadow really felt like an afterthought, really felt like it wasn't as important as it should have been. Even though these characters are continuously present in the film, I never feel like there's a giant threat. That being said, I still did feel like I had a good time watching it, mostly because of the characters and their interactions with each other. In a way, I enjoyed being introduced to these characters. I do think that if you've never watched anything My Little Pony, you know nothing about this universe as I did, this was a fantastic way to meet these characters. I didn't feel like I needed to watch seasons 1, 2, 3, 4, and then watch this film in order to get it. I simply tuned in and I got it. And I think that that is something that really worked for me. But again, overall, the story didn't feel like it was worthy of its hour and 39-minute runtime. So I end up giving it a pretty low score here of a 3 out of 10. As far as characters, like I said, without really knowing this franchise, it was easy to establish who these characters were and also to recognize their personalities. I think of myself personally as a bit of a Pinkie Pie, but I understand why people might say I'm something else. And I feel like the greatness of this version of My Little Pony is that people identify with whatever characters that they want to.
Hippos? Seriously? I've heard they're surprisingly graceful for their size.
These fun characters from the show are just so enjoyable to see on screen. And I think what is magnificent about this story, about these characters, and about what they did with the show and this film, and I'm going to assume other movies, is that yes, My Little Pony is typically for girls, but this show never feels like it's only for girls. This show feels like it was purposefully made with no gender in mind, and that the idea is that it's okay to watch this show. You don't have to worry about it being just for girls or just for boys. Yes, it's about pink unicorns. Yes, there are really pretty colors with pretty songs, pretty character names, etc. But I think the adventure plot lines that go on with these characters, especially in this film, can appeal to young boys, and I love that about it. I think a character like Capper, the Taye Diggs voiced character here, is a really cool cat character. I think his song in the film is probably the best of all the bunch. I love that he stuck around for a majority of this movie, and I think that as a boy who's watching this, I really identified with that character. Yes, I like Pinkie Pie. I also like some of the other main six characters, but I felt like this was the character that made it okay for me, if I was a young boy, to be watching this film. And I think that it would be a great introduction for young boys to watch this film and then to get into My Little Pony if they were interested in going further watching the show. As far as the villains here, I thought that Tempest Shadow was actually a great character. I love how dark that she is. Emily Blunt does a great job voicing her. I love kind of the juxtaposition, again, of the color palettes between the main six and Tempest Shadow. Tempest Shadow still feels like she could live in this world because of some of the other colors beyond just the blacks and grays. But the Storm King, even though he was the big bad of all of this, I felt like Tempest Shadow overshadows him. The Storm King feels a bit too silly to be taken seriously.
Let's get this storm started! Ooh, hey, that's good. I should trademark that.
whereas Tempest Shadow feels like a serious character who is desperate. I wished that the Storm King was a character that I wanted to root for, or at least hate as a villain more. The comedy just didn't work for me, for the character. As far as other characters from like the Seahorse Kingdom or all of the pirates, they were fun and they were enjoyable in the segments that they were in, but I never really felt connected to any of them. That all being said, I did enjoy a lot of the pirate characters. Some of the comedy that came from them was entertaining. I forget the name of like the queen of all of the seahorses. I really liked her. I think that the Hippogriff character also is a good character, but again, it's been a couple of days since I watched the film and like the name escapes me because it just didn't feel like it mattered that much. I'm gonna end up giving the characters here a 7 out of 10, and that's mostly because of the main 6 cast of characters from the TV show, as well as Capper and Tempest Shadow. As far as the sound and music here, the sound is pretty generic, but all right. The score is actually really good. And I think that the songs that are involved, again, it's been a few days since I've watched the film. I think that the one that Capper sings is pretty fun, but out of all the songs that are involved, I remember none of them. I don't think that they're that memorable. Similar to a movie like The Pebble and the Penguin that has a bunch of songs, it doesn't feel like I'm inspired to go listen to the soundtrack ever. They are songs that work in the moment, but never feel like they're a huge takeaway from the film. So for sound and music, I'm kind of going right down the middle here, giving it a little bit because I think that its score is actually really great, especially when it swells in these kind of defining moments of the film, giving it a 5.5 out of 10. And lastly, for the historical and cultural impact of this film, again, we're looking at just the film. We're not looking at the TV show or any of the other shows or the actual toys themselves. We're looking at just this hour and 39 minutes. Yes, I think the bronies were a huge cultural impact on society during the 20-teens. I also think that they were both a positive and a negative for the show. I think that more people were focused on this fandom than they were actually focused on the series itself. Or these characters themselves. And I think that that did a disservice to what the show is, which is, I think, a fantastic show, a fantastic film that I would actually like to go and check out a few episodes of the show, or some of the new stuff that I think is now on Netflix. But I think that this is the defining version of My Little Pony for a lot of people, and rightfully so. It's the longest running series. I think that this movie and kind of its change, trying to be more gender neutral. But ultimately, I think that the TV show is more impactful than the actual film is. Similar to talking about like the Rugrats movie. I think that the Rugrats movie is great if you loved Rugrats. You probably saw the My Little Pony movie if you watched the My Little Pony show. But this isn't a film that anyone was seeking out unless they watched the show, which I think ultimately doesn't have the impact or the cultural relevance that maybe it could if it wasn't attached to the show itself. 4 out of 10 here, giving us a total score of 27.5. And I'm gonna put it on the list. It's kind of dead center on the list right now. I don't know if it's going to stick around, but hey, it's, you know, it's doing okay. It's better than some of the movies on the list. If you're interested in further discussion about My Little Pony, the movie, or Friendship is Magic, the show, or any My Little Pony stuff, I'd actually love to hear from you. I'd love to hear more about this franchise, this toy line, etc., because I never got into it as a kid. I never watched any of the TV shows. This is my first exposure to it, and so anybody who has more knowledge about it, I'd love to hear from you. You can leave a comment down below about it, or you can join me over on Discord. You can find the link to the Discord in the description box. We always have a conversation over there about what the next film is, about what movies we're watching, and what else is going on over at Modern Mouse. That being said, another comment-suggested film coming up, Watership Down, totally taking a different turn here, much more sad adult type of film. Watership Down, we'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about that film. And in the meantime, thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoy the animated 100 list. Go back and watch the whole series if you'd like, as we try and find the greatest animated 100 films of all time and eventually knock Chicken Little off the list.